Okay, good morning, everyone. We made it through what I hope was a blessed weekend for everyone and had a chance, I believe, to catch our breath. And we are back this morning to do the business of the county and also to continue the budget deliberations that we are involved in. At this time, I'd like everyone please to rise. We will be doing the pledge to the flag. And let's keep all of those that are on the front lines of this pandemic in your thoughts and prayers. And also keep the Toms family in your thoughts and prayers. Toms was a fixture in our county. He was one of our natural resource police officers here in Carroll for many, many years. And I had the great opportunity to work with him through the fire company and other areas. So recently passed, and we'd like to keep all of those and everyone that has had loved ones lost in this pandemic in our thoughts this morning. So if we'd all please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, once again, good morning, everyone. We're going to go into Prior Carroll here for a little bit and give some updates on what's going on. I'll give you the numbers. If my colleagues would bear with me, I'd like to go first this morning, unlike I typically do. I usually let all you guys go, but I have a couple things I'd like to say this morning. So if you bear with me for a moment or two, I'd appreciate it. Just the latest numbers. We have 250 cases in Carroll at this point and 30 fatalities. 102 of those are community cases and 3 fatalities are also in the community. So that's where we are this morning. And I know I mentioned the fact that everyone took a break over the weekend, but certainly our frontline folks did not. There was constant communication with all resources over the weekend. And so everyone continues to work very hard as we go about trying to battle this so that there can be discussion, hopefully soon, about some sort of normalcy here and the way in which we're going to do that. Today is the first day back from spring break, virtual spring break, for our educators. And I'd just like to take a moment, and I know Dick and Dennis will probably do this as well, so I'll let them elaborate on it. But I'd just like to thank all of our teachers and educators that are back with their distance learning today. They're rolling out new content, and we know this is not easy, and we appreciate all the hard work. And I would also like to especially thank the Carroll County Public School nurses who have taken over the health department hotlines this morning. They will now be operating that hotlines for the health department so that can free up their nurses to do other things. They're actually operating out of Friendship Valley Portable, and they will be taking the call center for the health department 7 days a week starting today. And we certainly do appreciate our school nurses stepping up. Now, from a personal standpoint, and then I'll have an ask. I want to give a statement here, and again, I would ask that my colleagues bear with me. All of us are struggling to make the right decisions during these trying times, and we're all frustrated. And I'm only human. And last week I used a wrong choice of words in reference to our landfill. But I would like to just advise everyone that whether you agree or disagree, I believe there are correct ways to do both. There have been those that have agreed with us, I will say, and we've gotten some tremendous ideas from folks across the county on what we can do to get the landfill up and running 100%. There have been those that have disagreed as well, and I respect the ability to be able to do that. But I also have a problem with personal threats to myself and my family, which I think were a little bit over the top. I believe there's a correct way to disagree. So, with that being said, I know that our staff, they're working very, very hard. We actually have gotten a few ideas on how we can get it back up and running today. And as a result of those, I'd like to ask if we could put that first on our agenda for Thursday morning so that we can get back to some normalcy at our northern landfill out of 140. And again, to all those that I have offended, again, please bear with me as I am and my colleagues are all making decisions that we're not used to. There's no template for this. And we're doing the best that we can. And again, wrong choice of words on my part, but we need to move on. So, Roberto, I'd like to ask that our staff get back on first thing Thursday morning so that we can get our landfill back to where it should be. With that being said, I want to thank everyone that continues to be on the front line. I'd like to thank my colleagues. I know Commissioner Rothstein has been engaged with one of the retails down there to try to get things back to normal there. All four of my colleagues have been instrumental in keeping everybody in their thoughts and working very hard, as is our staff. It's still a struggle as we are virtually operating. So Roberta, our county administrator, Roberta Wyndham, has been doing a great job as well. With that said, I'm going to go right down the line here, and I'll begin with District 2, Commissioner Weaver.
Good morning. I just want to say one thing. I've watched some of the activities happening with the school system with virtual learning, and we've moved further in the last month than we have in years as far as learning and how things are happening. And I give a lot of credit to what they're doing. The other day, the school system's providing meals for those kids who need them out here, and they provide a lot. The other day, they were out in the rain, soaking wet, smiling, handing out lunches to people, and it's impressive to see what the school system has done. In fact, if anything good can come out of this, I would hope that we look down the road. We may have to change some of the way we educate in the future. Virtual learning can be a major part of this. Remedial education can be plugged in, and doesn't have to be maybe out to school all the time. So I'm looking at maybe some changes could happen in our educational system, and the virtual school may become a reality for some. Maybe not for all, but for some kids, it could be a way of the future. Maybe it'll change the way we do snow days. Everything can really. We go back and I hope they take a look at some of the things that are happening or have happened. And I give them a lot of credit to pull 25,000 kids into this program the way they have. And it's not perfect, but they've moved a lot. So I want to thank them.
Commissioner Frazier, District 3. Thanks, Dick.
Thank you. I just want to again thank everyone that's on the front lines or working through this, because it is very trying times. There's a lot going on. As people say, the goalposts are constantly moving because you don't know what to aim at. You just don't know what to do here. But people are working very, very hard. Healthcare workers, first responders, teachers, everyone is pitching in and doing their part. Just two funny notes, because I saw Jimmy Fallon was saying the other night that after homeschooling his kids, he thinks teachers should be paid $1 billion a year. He's pretty close. And then there's also something I saw that said, isn't this the time of year where you find out who your teachers are for next year? And it was from a parent that says, I hope next year it's not me again. So just thank you for everybody. It's working and doing all that they can to get us through this crisis. Hopefully within my science teacher timeline would be the first week of next month, restrictions may start being lifted. That's my own opinion. It's not official from anywhere. But if I'm looking at the science, that's what I'm saying. You can quote me on that. If I'm wrong, I never said it.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. District 4, Commissioner Boucher.
Good morning, colleagues. Commissioner Frazier, will that teacher increase affect your pension as well?
It should. I'm looking forward to seeing if that happens.
Okay, good luck on that. Commissioner Wance, thanks for your comments. We are all learning as we go, and it's important for us to get as much understanding as possible from our constituents. Of course, we'll all make some decisions that aren't perfect. We're feeling our way through it. So thank you very much. We're all in this boat together, and the bickering don't help. As we get new data in, we can alter our decisions and our policy. So thank you. Also, like Commissioner Weaver's comments about changing the learning process, there's a lot that we all can learn from this, especially we as county employers dealing with our staff. That in the future, there's a potential that some of our employees and staff could do some work from home. You know, we can mix that into the employee benefit and see how that works. So I think there's a lot that we can take from this and learn as we go forward. And last, I'd like to mention the fact that we have all these food pantries available throughout the county. Thanks to Roberta Wyndham and staff, they compose that list for everyone. They can go on our county website and see that list, because now I think it'll start becoming more and more acute for people that are most vulnerable, not having income and losing their food source. So those resources are out there for everyone to utilize. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. And District 5, Commissioner Ed Rothstein.
Just a few things. One, segue on what's been said. The volunteer support's been just phenomenal across the communities, our neighbors, helping neighbors, innovation, businesses, finding new ways to support and reaching out. So I really applaud our community for all that they are doing and will continue to do. I do have to comment, as you shared, one of the businesses that we're dealing with down in Eldersburg is the Walmart, the big box stores. There's a concern, again, of congregating within the big box stores, and they've been given guidelines from their corporate, along with CDC, on appropriate actions to take. I believe all of them, to include the Walmart in Eldersburg, is going to be doing its best to adhering to all the guidance and guidelines. I just ask that the community does their best in supporting the arrows in the aisles, you know, the entrances and the exits, and the small but important rules that are being established in the grocery stores and in the big box stores. We will all get through this together. I want to applaud our staff and, again, small businesses for their persistence and patience, both staff and small businesses, in the small business fund that we established, and I believe we'll be talking about in a little bit. Jack Liburn and his team, along with SBDC and the IDA and a lot of folks, really made that into a reality within days. And people are going to be getting money in their pockets in just a couple days because of that. The last thing is we do not have all the answers within one community. However, the communities working together, the counties, the jurisdictions, the region, the state working together, developing tools are really important. And there's a really fantastic tool that just happened a good bunch of friends of mine in businesses established on how small businesses can navigate through funding mechanisms and opportunities for them to stay afloat during this challenging time. Trying to post as much as I can on my social media, sharing with the county as well to get out on their social media. So I do applaud, you know, the county team for all of the press releases and activity on social media to get the word out on opportunities for businesses and folks alike to stay afloat during this. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Our County Administrator, Roberta Wyndham.
Good morning. I don't have anything specific. We're just continuing to do the work we can do virtually or in person on a limited basis. And thank you, gentlemen, for your support. We appreciate it.
Okay, with that being said, we'll roll into our first item on our agenda this morning, which is an update and discussion on our small business grant program that we put together. And for that, I'll call upon Director of Economic Development, Mr. Jack Liber. Jack?
Good morning, Commissioners. Want to give you an update on where the fund is right now. Up until about 12 o'clock last night, we had total applications of 515. 65 of them didn't meet the criteria that we first established. And we have 13 that are not in good standing with the state. So that gives us a net of 437,000. We had original funding of 500,000. We provided 1,250 to 400 small businesses. Well, I call it phase one here. If we want to cover the 37 applicants over the 400, we would need another roughly $50,000 to meet the first round. I can tell you in about an hour and a half, 102 checks are going to be sent out in the mail. It's our first round. And tomorrow we're going to send out another 100 checks.
Hey, Jack, thanks for the update and appreciate keeping me aware of the status as this was progressing over the last few days. Just to be clear, there are 437 appropriate applicants. The funding of $500,000 was enough to get us through 400 of those applicants. So in order for us to follow up with the 37, it's just under $50,000. So you're saying in order for us to answer the call for all 437, we need another $50,000 into the fund. Is that correct?
That is correct, Commissioner.
Okay. And the 65, the 13 not in good standing I got, the 65 that do not meet the criteria, my concern, and I think Commissioner Frazier is also, asked the same thing, and that is those businesses that are falling through the cracks of sole proprietors along with home-based businesses. These are folks that are doing their best. Yes, we'd be taking risk in recognizing them, and some could take advantage of this opportunity in a inappropriate way. But I believe that risk is minimal to the sense that we should be working hard to keeping all our small businesses because those sole proprietors and home-based businesses is where innovation starts. And it goes from a home-based business in a garage to a very large corporation in a matter of time. And you never know, we may have one of those in our community. So I'd like to know, Jack, how much money do we still have within the funding stream that we took the 500,000 out of? Do we still have about 350,000?
Based on Rob's numbers, our controller, he says we have about 350,000. However, there could be some bad loans in there that we may have to write off. So I said we have a good solid, let's say $250,000 in there.
Okay, because it'd be my position to my commissioners that we take a look at using that fund, the rest of that fund, and expanding this small business fund to sole proprietors along with home-based businesses. And I bet you, one, they'd appreciate it. And I think it's an opportunity to keep them afloat. The other piece of this is I know that Jack has opportunities to receiving funds from the state at a very low interest if necessary. Is that correct, Jack?
Correct, Commissioner.
Okay.
That would be for projects.
Okay. And again, I applaud everything you're doing and your team is doing. So that would be my motion, is to take that $250,000 and apply it to the small business fund at this time.
Well,
Ed, we lost audio. Could you repeat some of?
I apologize.
Nick, you were lucky.
My motion at this time is to take the rest of that fund, that 250,000 at this time, and if we could talk about additional funding, but that 250,000 and put it towards the small business fund that we've established, opening up the criteria to allowing small businesses to include sole proprietors and home-based businesses within Carroll County in good standing.
I'll second that. I like that idea.
Well, I agree, Commissioner Rothstein, and I did mention this last week, that I would like to see home-based businesses and people that don't have any employees but have their own business to get funding for this. I don't think we should use all the remaining money. My suggestion, it's just suggestion, it's open for talk, is that we pull about $100,000 to $150,000 out of that, is earmarked for just those two categories: sole proprietor and home-based business.
I guess.
Also, when we first put this out there, the money, the $500,000 we put out, I was not under the impression that we were going to cover everyone that applied, because I didn't think we would have enough money anyway. I just didn't think it would be possible. I thought that we were going to put that amount of money out there. It was a good idea to put that amount of money out there, but additional funding for that, I mean, we're doing what we can, but I would like to see $100,000 to $150,000 put aside for and earmarked specifically for home businesses and businesses that do not have employees.
I think, the challenge is, because it does become a first come, first serve approach and how businesses are vetted. That's where, you get to 400 and you're tapped out. We do have the funds to take care of that other 37. The other piece is, and this goes back to Jack, are there other funds available outside of that 250 that the IDA may have already established in their operational funds that would not hurt our county opportunities and can be applied towards this fund?
That's a hard question, because, we are bringing on, 3 parks this year, and we're going to have to borrow money, to do the infrastructure. The North Carroll Business Park is months away by spending, $3.2 million. We do have the money, and I know it was earmarked when I said last week, the $300,000, plus, let's say, for the IDA. Instead of transferring the money to the IDA at the end of the year, there's that $300,000 that I suggested to out of the infrastructure fund, instead of transferring it to the IDA at the end of the year, to transfer it to the operating budget. That some of that could be used, but remember too, if you transfer, let's say, $200,000 or $150,000, Commissioner, you still have $50,000 that 37 applicants really do meet the criteria. So do you want to finish that, let's say, phase 1 out of the 37, which would be about $46,250, and then add, $200,000 at a small business? You could do that.
Yeah, and actually that was my thought, was where the 250 was 50 to close out phase 1, and then 200 to continue the fund, opening it up for sole proprietors and home-based businesses in good standing.
I would also like to see the 50 that haven't received it when the first, as you call it, the first round, although I don't want to look at it that way, to get the funding as well, because my guess is the reason that they didn't get the funding because the application came in a little later or reviewed later, and there was no time limit set. So that's not really criteria that, you know, we should try to enforce the timing. I don't think that's a good idea. So I'd be in favor of doing that. But the amount of money is what I'm looking at. I don't think we should take most or even all of that money. I think if we put 100, let's say, like I said, 100,000, but that is specifically earmarked toward home businesses and sole proprietor businesses. That's what that money is specifically earmarked for. The other 50,000 would be to clean up the rest of the people that have already got applications in, or the rest of the businesses. That's what I would like.
That 100,000 would be 80 sole proprietors.
Right, and currently, we do have a motion and a second for 250,000 towards this fund. So,
We do.
I'd like to keep it at that because there's a whole lot more than 80 small businesses, sole proprietors in good standing, home-based businesses in good standing that could really use this fund. And again, we can't answer to everybody, but it is our, I believe, responsibility to do the best we can with funds that we do have available in helping these businesses. So I'm still sticking at 250 at this point.
Okay, would you, Commissioner, like to amend your motion to say 50,000 to clean up the first group that's what we've already got, but earmarking and say whatever's left or 150,000, whatever it is, and then for just the sole proprietor and the home businesses, because my fear is that if we just open up wide open again, that a lot of businesses will get in. They've already had the first bite of the apple, so to speak, and the home businesses and the sole proprietor businesses haven't had a bite at it. I would like to see part of that money earmarked just for those two businesses.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. So if I amend the motion to the 46,000 to finish phase one, I think it's 46,050, something like that, to finish phase one, which are small businesses in good standing in Carroll County that have been identified, the 37 above the 400, and then the rest of the 200 plus thousand in phase two focused on small businesses, sole proprietors, home-based businesses in good standing in Carroll County to be identified.
Now, there won't be a second phase to this, right? This is, the money will be depleted. This is phase one and the only phase, is that right?
Well, phase one is what we've established and is what Jack has appropriately deemed as phase one. I think if we said another press release, which would be the phase two of this fund, is focused on identifying sole proprietors and home-based businesses in good standing in Carroll County, vetted through economic development, and be awarded the $1,250 grant.
Jack, I like to say nice vest to start off. Also like to state that all this assistance to the small businesses is great, but unless we open up the economy, it's the equivalent of water on a plant with no sunlight. All this infusion of potential cash in these small businesses means absolutely nothing unless we open our economy up. So I want to know when our economies will open up to help these small businesses out.
Is that a discussion for Jack? I don't believe for Jack to answer, but is that an open discussion for us? And if it is,
Yeah.
it may not be. I think we're talking two separate actions at this point. I'd like to focus on this one, and then if necessary, we can have a open discussion. But
yeah, we need to have that discussion because we need to open up this economy. It needs to come in a set, or else we're not doing anything worthwhile.
No, Commissioner, on phase two or phase one, whatever you want to call it, we excluded the nonprofits and the medical services, and they would still be excluded. The only problem with this home offices, we might not be able to check it all out with the state on SSTAT. Some of them might not follow those, so we wouldn't we'd have to check the address out in the use and everything, but we wouldn't be able to see if they're in good standing with the state because a lot of them wouldn't follow that form. And to your question, Commissioner Boucher, I think that's a medical question and not, you know, a business question about opening up businesses.
Hey, Jack, when you say medical, because I've heard from people that are like massage therapists and stuff like that, are they excluded? Because, I mean, I guess that is medical, but it's not really medical. They're running their own massage business or something of that sort. And I don't think we should exclude them. Just my opinion.
We did not exclude them.
The criteria.
We gave that, they're in the original 437. We did not exclude them. If you could, Commissioner, your motion instead of using 46,250 to make it 50,000, because we could get one or two today. And I just want to be fair, you know, to the one or two we might get in today, make it even.
And that's fair to make it 50,000. As far as sole proprietors and home-based businesses, they have to be established within the state. So they have to be filed, you know, with an EIN, you know, and then go from there. It's not just I'm a home-based business handyman that is not established. No, they need to either be recognized as sole proprietor with a tax EIN and LLC, whatever it may be. But yeah, I think that's a necessity at this point.
We will check that.
Okay, Commissioner Weaver, were you okay to, did you second that amended motion?
Yes.
All right, any other questions on the motion? If not, all those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Now, I think procedurally we have to transfer the funds, I believe. I want to make sure we go with the right procedures here. Is that correct, Roberta?
No, we don't. You're taking care of. The motion takes care of it. We'll just send a check to the IDA and amend the agreement that the MOU with the IDA to reflect the new dollar amount and the new requirements for this additional month.
We will need to have an IDA meeting and have a new MOU, but we'll work with Roberto on that. We'll do that as soon as possible this week.
Right.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jack. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You brought up one topic, and I'll bring it up with my colleagues. I think our nonprofit community is struggling as well. We've got 14 fire companies, just as an example, that are taking a huge hit on their fundraising efforts. And I know that we are attempting to try to find relief for them. I was on a conference call last night with you know, the likes of the Westminster Municipal Band. And because there are no parades or anything happening, there's no money coming in. So we're looking, and we have instructed folks to look as to whether or not there are grants out there that are available for our nonprofits. So I don't know. We'll have to continue to do that. I'd like to try to get Deb Standiford involved in that to help to see if there are ways in which we can get our nonprofits some relief as well. So I know that needs to be on the horizon too, but we've only got so much and we can only do what we can with, and this is one of the efforts that we've done. So I applaud you for that, but I want us to make sure that we need to continue to know that everybody is struggling with this. And Eric, to your comments, you know, I will say that it's just not as easy as saying, okay, let's go flip a switch and now everything's back. This is a public health strategy working alongside an economic strategy. Both of those working hand in hand will get us where we need to be. Social distancing is working, but if we flip that switch and go right back and just do everything as we normally would, I'm just afraid that we're going to be right back to where we were, and then we're going to have to start all over again. And I can't fathom starting this all over again. I think we've got to do it in the most expert way, trusting the experts in the field. It's got to be gradual, and it's got to be controlled based on public health versus economics. So, listen, this is. I get it, and I hear your frustration as well. We're all frustrated, but if we don't do this correctly and listen if we don't do this correctly and listen to those experts so that we can get this back where we need to be in the controlled effort that it needs to be, we're going to be in trouble again, and we just cannot go through this again. So, so that's my comments on that. And again, we've got to rely. I know the governors are working on it. There's various states that are putting themselves together to work on ways in which we can get things started to gradually open again. But I know everybody's all in on that. So, but I do want to keep our nonprofits in our thoughts, because that community's hurting really bad as well. So I don't know what else to do other than to get our grants folks who do an amazing job, or we've got one, actually, a couple, but that's it, to really start looking at that for our nonprofits. So any other discussion on that topic?
Commissioner, there are large grants for nonprofits, and I can tell you some of the nonprofits, and they've called me, have received large grants that you can, and we will send that out to all the nonprofits, how to, apply for that. But one of the nonprofits called me yesterday and got a check for $38,000 to fund the payroll, and that's 80% grant and 20% payback over a long period of time. And that's a federal program. So we'll make sure today with Stephen that we send all the information out on how to apply that. And we also, they can call us and we can help them go through the process. And Stephen is out there also. So there is hope for the nonprofits, and they are applying, I can tell you.
Okay, that's great, Jack. If we could push that out, I know you, like you say, you're going to, and that's great. And then, maybe through our social media and through our press releases and through the news media, maybe we can get that out, because we're not, just like small business, we're going to have a tough time trying to track each one of them, and some of them are going to miss it. So if we can get it all out and push it, and I know Commissioner Rothstein, you've talked about this before, let's keep pushing this stuff out so that people see it. That would be a great thing. Would the nonprofits can contact your office? Is that right, Jack?
They can contact us or call Steve, and we'll send it out to all the firehouses, and we'll send out the press release again. Yes, they can call our office or call Stephen direct. We'll send that out.
All right, thanks, Jack. Anything else on this topic from my colleagues?
Has the state talked presently about a plan to reopen at this point? Do we have any thoughts? I know Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, all are starting to work on a rollout plan. Is Maryland in the process of even looking at that presently?
We had a conference call with the secretary last Thursday, and it's coming down to the governor and the medical. They're saying it's supposed to peak this week or next week, and I read the same and hear the same that you do, but that's going to be a governor's call and a local call also. And Commissioner Wentz, I know you sit on a lot of those committees with Commissioner Rothstein. You probably know better than I do on that one.
Sorry,
I'm
Steve.
sorry. Go ahead, Dennis.
The only way, if we want to get things started earlier, is to have people have their blood tested and see if they have the antibodies in their blood that shows that they've had the COVID-19 virus, because I think 80% of people that get it show no or very few symptoms. So many people may have already had it. And once you have it, according to science, you're not going to get it again. So we could have and I don't know how to put the testing out there. That's the hard part, getting everybody with that blood test and say, you've got the antibodies. If you had it, you're not going to get it again. You're not going to spread it. But that's I mean, that's the only way to get it out quicker, but I don't even see that would be quicker because of the expense and the amount of time to get all that testing done. My guess is we're just going to have to wait the 3-4 weeks, whatever it takes, until this. I heard it was going to peak this week, and then it start going down. When that happens, then things might be starting to loosen up even without the testing. But the way to get it out earlier is to do that testing, but it's not. We don't have that everywhere, and that's why it's taken so long, my opinion.
Hey, Jack, if you can, mute your mic. I see your mic is still on, so just in case there's feedback. But Eric, I apologize. I did not mean to cut you off in what you were starting to share. I just wanted to get through that one action, but you started, providing your thoughts and insight. So I don't want to again cut you off. So where were you going with what some of the conversation you started having?
Opening back up, I think that our objective is to take our resources and focus in on the most vulnerable of this pandemic, and that's the elderly and people with pre-existing conditions. I believe everyone else should be able to go back to living a normal life. And actually, in health terms, I believe what we're doing is going to have a long-term negative impact because there's a natural immunization which takes place within society. And we are restricting that by locking people down. People are more likely to contract this disease being confined in spaces, and that's exactly what we're doing with the people locked up. And most people who get this virus don't have no symptoms or they become inoculated by it, which means our present policy will lead to us having waves in the future of this infection coming back. So it's actually counterintuitive to find the solution. And long term, we're doing tremendous damage to our society. We can't even properly set our county budget because we don't know the long-term impact of this. I would love to see the county office building open up on Monday morning and give the option of employees who have underlying health conditions or concerns the flexibility of whether they can come back to work or not. I believe we have reached the apex and peak of this curve. And once we've done that, now it's a matter of us getting back into the groove of things and having a functioning economy. The cure we have is actually going to cause more long-term damage to our society. And we as county officials are financially going to have to deal with this. Our resources should be focused on protecting the vulnerable, not shutting everyone down. And I'd love to see this economy get up and rolling as soon as possible. I don't think it's going to have tremendous fatality implications for having done so. But we are actually hurting our economy, and we're actually hurting our citizens in the long term by maintaining the existing policy we are in. We know more now about this pandemic than we did when we originally set this policy. And there's nothing wrong with shifting the policy as you review the new data that comes in.
Okay, let me jump on just a couple things. One, you're absolutely right. We know more about the pandemic than we did when it first started. I'm just going to be as pragmatic, again, talking about the community and the neighbors. It is my understanding from, listening and learning that we are all vulnerable to catching this virus. We are not all as vulnerable to becoming sick or, very ill to dying with this virus, but everybody is as vulnerable as the next guy or gal. And they've shown that the social distancing is minimizing that vulnerability, and that's how it's being mitigated. So you're right that those with underlying conditions are becoming more sick than anybody else, but that doesn't mean that those are the only ones that are more vulnerable to receiving or getting this virus. So everybody is. And as far as the curve, I have no clue except what I'm being told and what I'm being shown. I think the appropriate actions that we are taking in the community to maximize the social distancing, I believe is working, and we should allow it to continue. And the key is to adhere to it. and we're all in it, to adhere to the social distancing, to a point where we don't have all these cases and deaths in our community. So I'm not for, like Commissioner Wance shared, flipping a switch. I think that would be a reckless approach. But I know I understand what you're saying. I just think that we are not in a position at this time to switch, to flip that switch. That's my thoughts. As far as the budget, you're right. This is really tough times, and there are a lot of unknowns. Secretary Rumsfeld was very well known saying the unknown of the unknowns, and that's kind of where we're in. We're gonna get through it. It's just it's gonna be tough. So okay, I'm done.
And I'm not here to argue your point either, Eric. I do agree with some of your thoughts on that. But from a health standpoint, and my background, I mean, my wife's a nurse. I've been a first responder for 44 years now. I think there's a tad bit of disrespect to that community if we just flip the switch. Those folks are on the front lines and just challenged with an incredible amount of work of the likes that they've never seen before. So I want to respect that community as well. Our volunteer first responders who are out there, and for us to just suggest that, okay, we're ready to just go back to normal now is also troubling for me, because we have done all that we can to support who I think is one of the best governors in the country. And I don't think that we can put ourselves on an island and disrespect all that he and his cabinet and staff have done either. That to me is wrong. And then finally, for me, I have always been and always will be about public safety. And for us to say, okay, everybody come back to work now. Everybody's good, because the only people that are going to get this are those with underlying conditions or those in our aging community. It's just flat out wrong. Look around the country and look at the people that are losing their lives with this. That's just wrong. And I would caution any of us to get into the health of this. I'm no expert on it, I can tell you. It's also been proven that those that have been tested positive and are out of it now, in other countries, they're getting it again. So the problem is there's so many strains of this, and there's just no way that we can, any of us, I don't think, can say that, yeah, well, we're good. So that's my challenges with it. And again, I think we've got to be very careful here. And I think there's a ton of people a lot smarter than me when it comes to this, but I continue to say that it's got to be a public health strategy and an economic strategy working together to get us back to where we need to be in a gradually controlled way. And I think we've got to be mindful of that. And again, keep the respect for those that are on the front lines fighting this thing. It's just, I think we've got to just continue to be mindful of that. If something would happen to somebody because we're concerned about somebody not being in an office on 225 North Center, I would never forgive myself. I just think we need to be mindful of that. Listen, there's a lot of people writing a lot of stuff out there, but I'm relying on who I think we should be relying on. That's our public health leaders to get us through this. So there's my 2 cents too, Eric. And again, listen, all of us are frustrated. We are. I mean, again, that's when I started off this morning. Have I said things I shouldn't have said? Absolutely. Have we made decisions that we maybe shouldn't have made that are maybe not the best? Absolutely. No template. There's no example here to use. We're all in this together, and it's tough. We're all frustrated. So there's my 10 cents. Now I'll stop.
Well, it's very important for all the people in the county to see that we're actually having this discussion, that all these different points of views are coming at us, and ultimately they'll develop a policy which we come out of this with. So the dialogue is important. I appreciate all my colleagues recognizing that and having this conversation.
All right, anything else on these, on this topic? All right, with that being said, Jack, thank you very much. And now we'll call upon, Ted, I believe. I think, anything else on our agenda? I don't have it right in front of me. We're moving right from this into, budget, I believe. Is that correct, Roberta?
No, there's the second item. There's going to be $300,000, Jack said, in infrastructure fund that won't be spent this year. He had suggested to send that to to transfer that to the general fund. So that's the second item.
Okay, so that's separate than our normal budget. Is that right?
Okay, now, well, the money is in the general fund. What you'd want to do is move it from economic development to the reserve for contingencies, where it would then be available to you for the future.
Right. Sorry, Ted. Appreciate your correction.
I make a motion to do just that.
Second that elaborate motion.
All right, any questions on that topic? All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, now, Mr. Zaleski, get us started with the rest of this morning's activity.
All right. Just want to take a few minutes at the beginning to, again, touch on some things that have happened in the last few days. Try and make sure we're all in the same spot on what's happening and where we are. Okay, go ahead, Deb. Okay, big question. What will be the fiscal impact of COVID-19? Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's got opinions on it. My answer, go ahead, Deb. No one knows. And I don't mean this to be dismissive, but I think it's important to understand nobody has the answer to this question. Now, we are, other counties are, the state is, we're all playing what ifs. We're all trying to say, if we assume this, if this happens, if something else happens, what would that mean? But no one knows the answer. Good. Why don't we know? Now, I've had conversations with people suggesting, well, just do this. All you have to do is fill in the blank. And I don't want to spend a lot of time going through all these questions, but this list of questions is why we don't know. There's always uncertainty, but we don't have this kind of uncertainty. And these are the font is small in these things. And it's not important that you see it. It's small because I put a whole lot of stuff in here to say there's a lot of questions we can't answer. You know, what are going to happen with all the businesses? What are going to happen with all the people who have lost their jobs? What's going to be the impact on home sales? Are developers and builders going to be making decisions to not do things? This is a huge one. What's going to be the impact to counties of the state budget balancing? I'm very worried about this. Okay. Are we going to go into a recession? Keep going. What's going to happen with interest rates? And these little font, but these are just the big questions. There's dozens and dozens of other questions, and we don't have answers to any of this stuff. All we can do is take our best shot at making what seem like reasonable assumptions, run that out and say, this is what it would look like. But we know that we don't know. Okay, the unemployment claims. I want to pull up one slide from the presentation. The comptroller did a press conference the other day, and the director of the Board of revenue estimates was talking about the situation. And just one graph is just astounding to look at that helps you understand just how unusual what we're in is. Did we lose you, Deb? Oh, okay, there. Okay, this is unemployment insurance claims. That blue line is what's happening to us right now. The yellow line is the recession of the early 90s. The orange line is the Great Recession. You can see on all three of these lines, we got up to close to 250,000 uninsurance claims. Those other two recessions, it took 3 years to reach those numbers. We've got those same numbers in a matter of weeks. There's just no way to talk about this in relationship to things that we've been through before. So we don't need to spend time on this. I just wanted you to have the impact of seeing what this looks like. Okay, go ahead, Deb.
I think that proves a gradual reopening of the economy is all prolonged the misery.
Did you go to slide, Deb?
Hold tight.
Okay. I've got to get some better help. Okay, now on those state projections, this has gotten a lot of attention. I just want to make a couple points to make sure people aren't misinterpreting what's been out there. The state did not project a fourth quarter loss of $2.8 billion, even though it's being talked about that way. That 2.8 is a worst case scenario. Not the worst thing that could possibly happen, but based on the knowledge that they have, the data that they're looking at now, 2.8 billion is the worst case of the spectrum of possibilities that they see. That's not to diminish the importance of this number. I think it's just being misused some. And I also want to point out, you can't directly translate what the state is looking at to what Carroll County is going to looking at. And that's because the state's largest revenue is income tax. It's our second largest revenue. And their second largest revenue is sales tax. We don't have a sales tax. So their two biggest revenues, the biggest part of their income is being significantly impacted by what's going on. We're not being hit in quite the same way. Bad as it is for us, the state arguably is in a worse situation. Go ahead. And I think as we're thinking about this, we need to think about the phases of how we're being impacted. And you've had a little bit of conversation about this. You know, we have the shutdown phase, what we're in right now. People aren't working, businesses are closed. We have the estimate you've heard from us that we might be losing $4 million a month while we're in the shutdown phase. So clearly, the longer that goes on, the greater the impact is to us. Now, if this ends in May, that's going to be a very different picture than if it goes into August. Then we have the reopening and transition phase. You know, you've all mentioned things about gradual opening, flipping switch, all those things. The question is, what is that going to look like when we get there? I think we can safely say not every business is going to immediately open. Not every person who lost a job is going to immediately have a job. But how long is it going to take? And then at some point, we're back to normal, or what might seem abnormal, whatever our new normal is. What is that going to look like when we get there? How long does each of these phases last? And what are the characteristics? Go ahead, Deb. Then we need to apply that to our fiscal timeframes. The first thing we're thinking about right now is year-end fiscal year 20. What's the end of this year going to look like? How big will the revenue losses be? A lot of that is going to be determined by, does this shutdown go through the end of fiscal year 20 to June 30th? Again, on those state numbers, they were making that assumption that the shutdown would continue until June 30th. What action should we be taking to strengthen our position? We're deep into the year now, so there's not a whole lot we can do, but I think we do need to talk about the possibility of reducing discretionary spending. And then just keep in mind that wherever we end up year end in fiscal year 20, a lot of that is being driven by short-term changes that won't be setting a new base. Where we end fiscal year 20 is not a new starting point for 21, 22, and beyond. Now it's going to get very difficult to understand and pull things apart, but it's not going to be as simple as saying, start from here. Fiscal year 21, we know we have to adopt the budget. Will COVID-19 extend into fiscal year 21? If it does, that starts to change the picture for us. How long does it take us to get back to normal? And as we adopt the fiscal year 21 budget, something I think needs to be very big on you guys' minds, we need to avoid taking actions that are going to make future budgets more difficult. And what I'm talking about there is primarily taking on new ongoing expenditures. Even if we can afford to do it in 21, will we be able to afford it in 22 and 24 and so on? And then that carries us into fiscal year 22 and beyond. You know, hopefully we will be well beyond the direct impacts of COVID, but how long will the ripple effects, the implications of everything that happened affect us in 22 and beyond? Okay, go ahead, Deb. So where do we go from here? Now, one possibility is we have a budget that is more or less flat from fiscal year 20. You could just choose, let's stay here. I think there are very strong arguments to not go any higher than where we are. And I think there are good arguments to go lower. Now, there has been talk of adding targeted funding. There have been specific places, prominently the school system, where you've talked about wanting to do more. If that's going to happen, one of three things has to happen. We have to push our revenue estimates up beyond where we're suggesting right now. And with that, take on the risk that is implied by those higher revenues. Every dollar we push this up makes it more likely that we won't actually see it happen. You can cut other costs. We've talked a little bit about this. It's one thing to talk about theoretical cuts in cost, but what we really have to talk about is if you want to spend less, what do you not want to do? What are you going to do less of? Or you can raise taxes. Then I said there are arguments for going lower on the budget. If you do want to reduce further, we're back to that same question. What cuts are possible and what cuts are acceptable to you? And what are the implications of making them? I really believe there's nothing you can do now that is not going to have significant impact of some sort. There are no easy moves to make. You got it, Deb.
Ted, if I can ask, just
Yep.
go back to slide 8 for a sec. Pushing revenue estimates up and take on the risk that it implies. Can you either now or once this is done, provide what those revenue estimates are and the brackets that you see? I'm still not grasping the income tax bracket that you see right now. And the reason is I'm reading different articles of, in the newspaper from the different counties and how they're starting to do their calculations in their budget. And it brings up more questions for me on what are income tax, the good, what you believe it's going to be, and then where we think it could be, and then, that kind of stuff. Does that make sense or no? And I know you've said it before. I'm still not grasping it.
Yep. And income tax, even in normal times, income tax is difficult because we don't have enough data to really look at it and say, okay, we can see what's happening here. And it's also complicated by how the money is distributed. Like one conversation we've had, there's the state was providing some information on unemployment by different industries. And the idea was that the composition of industries in your county will have an impact from one place to another. over the next year, though, that will be meaningless to us because the money isn't distributed that way. It's distributed by an assumption of how much money that you get. So you run into all kind of things like that. But what we've done in the short term, and this is, we're working off of what the Board of Revenue Estimates of the state did. And, they have the time and resources and data to do things we can't do. And what they've suggested is statewide, they're projecting a 22% loss of withholdings and a 60% loss of estimated payments while we're in the shutdown phase. We applied those same projections to our numbers, which gets us to the roughly $3 million of lost income tax per month while we're in the shutdown. We're not totally confident of that. So we said, well, it might be more than that. And we know there's going to be impact to recordation and impact to smaller, but when you add them all up, other revenues, that's saying income tax might be higher, and adding those other revenues is what got us to $4 million a year.
So did you, by chance, read the article on in Baltimore County? The county executive is proposing his budget, I think, later this morning, if not right now. And comments that were made in the article were that Baltimore County sees their income tax much greater than it was expected. And that's just counter to where we are now. I mean, am I talking just apples and oranges, or is it just reckless on their part for saying something like that?
I'm not sure.
Confused.
I'm not sure I saw that, but I can't imagine any scenario where they're looking at more income tax than expected right now. If that's what it said, I almost would have to think the article got it wrong.
Okay.
Because there's nothing fundamentally different about Baltimore County than us or Garrett County or Worcester County right now.
Right, and that's what just kind of caught me off guard when I read the article, unless I just read it completely wrong. But it sounds like they are going to be pulling out of their contingency funds, their rainy day funds that they have. But they made a comment about their income tax being higher, and I was just confused on that point. So, okay.
And when we talk about these revenues, just I've said this before. I just want to make sure I'm clear. Right now, with the revenue number we're working with, that flat number, I have a lot more concern that there's downside to this number than I have hope that there's upside to that number. Okay, and then connected to all this, a big caution I want to put out there as you start to take up your deliberations again. We've taken actions to improve the bottom line. But even with all those things that you've done so far, fiscal year 26 remains far from balanced. It's not in the ballpark of being balanced. If we don't balance the plan, and from conversations we've had already, I'm pretty much working with the assumption that we are not going to have a balanced 6-year plan this year. But if we don't balance the plan, I think it will become tempting to add spending in early years, saying, okay, we have enough money in the first 2 or 3 or 4 years to do this. It's going to be very tempting to do that because there's things you want to get done and it will look like a way. What I want to say to you, though, is even if you don't balance the plan, that doesn't change what the projections for 26 are. If we take on additional ongoing expending in the early years, all we're going to do is make our eventual problem worse. The only way that doesn't happen is if we have a sudden, unexpected major growth of revenues, and it just solves the problems for us. But I don't think there's any way we can say, let's build our plans on that. So I know there are things you're going to want to think about to add spending. I understand. Just want to say, think very hard before we do that. Go ahead, Deb. And then 2 things I wanted to follow up on. There was, as has been in the past, an idea that if we didn't provide transit, that MTA would step in. As that conversation was happening, I think I had comments from at least 6 places saying that's not true. And we followed up on that to make sure that our understanding was right. And there is no idea that MTA would step in if we weren't providing transit. Now, there are all kinds of arguments for what we should or shouldn't do in transit and at what level, but MTA stepping in is not really part of the picture. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on, because I don't think this ended up being clear, you made a move to reduce AgPres funding by $500,000 a year, $500,000 of cash not going in, and that you were going to put in a $5 million bond. And I may have inadvertently muddied the waters on this when we were talking about interest rates. And after the fact, Commissioner Weaver, I understood something you said that I didn't get at the time. You were talking about how bad interest rates were in relationship to the installment purchase agreement program, which is where we're a buyer. On bonds, where we're a seller, interest rates are good. The nuance to this that muddies what this looks like is the people who buy our bonds, the way they set them up, they're not structuring 2% debt. They're structuring something more like 5% debt, and they give us what's called a bond premium up front, a lump of money, so that when you average that out over the whole thing, we might have a 2%. But what we end up paying in debt service is more like 5%. So when you think about taking out the 500,000 and putting in the debt service we're going to pay, the impact to your bottom line is not very significant. You know, we're talking about $25,000 a year or something along those lines. You know, so it's not a big help to you in terms of providing other ongoing funding. And one more, Deb. Okay, and here's what we have remaining for your proposed deliberations after this morning. Okay, anything I need to go back to? Any questions we need to deal with? Well, I guess it, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, then Deb just brought up the, what have you done and where have you left things? So you can see the various decisions you've made, and then we get all the way through them. You know, you can see the bottom line as it stands today. Thanks, Deb. Forgot about that. Oh, we lost. Can you take it all the way down to the bottom line before we take it off?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Thanks.
Oh, that's right. She had to switch to another file. That's why it went off.
Hey, Ted, does any state, federal aid money come in here that could help balance this budget? Do we have any projections or anything that would come in to help us with an influx of funds?
We don't. There continues to be lots of talk, but as recently as late yesterday afternoon, talked with MACo, and they don't have any guidance for us on what to expect.
So if we build this budget presently and we do get some influx of funds, I think Commissioner Wance had mentioned opening it up again in September to revisit because of all the uncertainties. I mean, we're building this blindly or in the dark presently. That could be an income here that would offset some of this for us, and we have a whole new picture to look at, correct?
Well, in the short term, I mean, if we do get federal and state funding, it's going to be one-time funding or short-term funding. I would think that the biggest thing that would be able to do for you would be to allow you to hang on to some of your reserves so that we feel a little bit more comfortable about 21 and, you know, if things don't play out the way we expect.
if we look at this the way it is right now, if we go back to the bottom line for a second here, Deb, we look at this the way it is right now. If we left it this way, we could theoretically take the fund balance from FY22 and FY23 and apply them to FY26, and take the fund balance from FY21 applied to FY25, and whatever was left over that goes to 26, and then we have it balanced out for all those years.
Okay, but that's not fund balance. It's not money that exists.
Well, yeah, but that's your projection of what we would have left over.
Yeah, but you'd be saying we're gonna balance future years on money that we don't know is gonna happen. And
Well,
if you want to do that, just
every year.
see, the problem is if that then allows you to think that it's okay to add ongoing expenditures, and it
No,
doesn't.
I'm not saying add anything else. I'm saying what we have right now. I'm not saying add anything to any of the columns or add any money anywhere else. I'm not saying do that.
Okay, then my suggestion to you would be that you leave the picture how it is. So we don't make ourselves feel comfortable that 26 is not a problem. Now, if in fact in 21 we end up with $1.8 million left over, that will be available to you in the future. But once we know we have it, that's different than saying, we think maybe it's going to happen. And remember, I'm saying to you, I still feel like there's more downside to these revenue projections than there is upside.
That 1.8 million surplus is not going to happen. We have no statistical data that shows that that's actually going to be our revenue.
I agree.
How big of an impact would the elimination of South Precinct have on those out years in 25 and 26? Is it a substantial impact if that was pulled?
Near the end, it's close to $1 million a year between the debt service and the employees. I think it might have got 900,000.
It's 900,000 in FY27. 26 is, I think, closer to 700,000.
Okay, so it'd be just beyond this plan, but that's where you're headed.
I'd like to eliminate that debt service on ag preservation as well. It's just counterproductive. All we're doing is saddling ourselves with more long-term debt to pay off and limiting ourselves. I'd love to see that be removed.
But you mean to not do the $5 million bond issue? Is that what you're saying?
Where I have to say, I would love to see it removed too. I was one of the ones voted against it, but someone who voted for it has to bring that up.
Well, again, the impact of it is much less than we expected, correct, Ted? We were making an assumption that it was having a much greater impact by putting that $5 million bond in there. And you're telling us it actually is not having such an impact, correct?
Yes, and we knew that when we were talking. I think I just didn't do a good job of making it clear.
No, you didn't, but that's right. Getting used to it. Okay.
It's crystal clear to me, crystal clear. That's why I voted against it.
So, like I said, you got a face for radio. So if we took away that $5 million bond and we left it by reducing the ag preservation from 3 million to 2.5 million annually, understanding the impact. I mean, that's the key, is we want to be able to keep the momentum going with our goals of ag preservation. Well, yeah, I agree. I think we should do away with the bond. I think its impact is much less than what I expected. So I will make a motion to do away with that debt service and still maintain the 2.5 million for ag preservation.
Second.
All right, any further discussion on that? Could I ask to see the two together? In other words, compare the impacts so that I could see it. I continue to be challenged with the fact that we keep attacking ag and attacking ag. If there's ever a time that we shouldn't be attacking ag, it's now. Folks need to realize where the food's coming from. So I'm concerned about this. It seems like the easy place to just pick that fruit, no pun intended. I'm having a real tough time with this. But I'd like to see the two together so that I could compare what the impact of the bond is versus putting it back to 2.5. Does that make sense, my question?
Yeah, it's showing there now in lines 100 and 101.
I agree with you, Commissioner Wance. You are attacking an area that is very fragile at the present time. I don't know if you realize, I know you don't, commodity prices and where they are this year. You may see a folding of a lot of agriculture at the end of this year due to what's happening in this pandemic, which triggers some other things happening. You have dairy farmers dumping milk right now. With the school shut down, everything happening, it is a fragile economy for a lot of these guys. And another year and a lot of these guys spend millions of planting right now, and it's happening without a hope of recouping even their costs somewhat. And this could be one thing that does help some people. I proposed a bond issue that gives some flexibility to people out there to maybe have ground that's not in farmland preservation. It may help them get through this year. This is not much different than the small business grants that we kind of put out, a little different focus on it, but it's there. It could be a help. It may not. I know where our bottom line is tough here, but this is going to be a real interesting year. And we get a drought, national drought anywhere, or some other issues coming in, who knows where this could go. This is very uncertain times. And, you know, we are very fortunate in this country. Only about 9% of our disposable income goes for food. If that would go up, say 30, 40%, what would it do to our economy? What would it do to everything else going on? So that's why I'm a big proponent of agriculture out here. And I don't emphasize so much how frail that industry is. But a year or two of national disasters and even worldwide disasters could put us in a totally different environment than anything we've ever been used to. So be careful what you do on these things. I do have to agree with Commissioner Wance. This is it's out there. It's a positive thing. It's been positive for 40 years, and we keep robbing. We've done it twice, 3 times in the last few years. We keep doing it because it is successful. It will have an impact eventually.
I don't think we're whittling it away to zero. And I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate everything that you're sharing. I'm watching on the news the same, the milk being poured out, the thousands of gallons, you know, Alabama and Georgia having a really, really tough time with some of the fruit that they're pulling up now that's going to be wasted. I don't know. So that's all the national piece. And what I don't know is what is the impact in Carroll County if we go from 3 million to 2.5 million. I mean, will it be significant over the next 3 to 5 years, you know, as we're trying to figure out where to pull money from to ensure that we continue the education and other programs we have? I get the national sentiment, but I'm trying to understand what is the impact in Carroll County.
And I can't answer the big question there, but just in a very direct numbers way, you're talking about approximately 120 acres a year with the loss of $500,000.
Yeah, Ed, impact to Carroll County is different when we have three types of agriculture here. We have small sustainable agriculture and we have the larger crop production type agriculture. In I guess 1960s, we had 600 and some dairy farms in the county. We're down to 23. And some of those guys are, as I said, very fragile where we're going. And all of a sudden, the bottom drops out of the ability to move milk products or whatever, and they're dumping milk or have to. I'm not sure any of it's happened yet locally, but we're nothing more than a reflection of the national picture. We're small scale compared to what happens in Iowa and a lot of the Midwest, but even what happens in the southern United States. But every time we take a hit at it, we start to have an impact on us. Now, you're looking at 125 acres in this. Doesn't sound like much, but that's the average size farm here in Carroll County. So that's one that you lose. You lose one here, you lose one there, you lose one somewhere else, and it does have an impact. This is preservation. Remember, our long-term goal is to, we just buy the lot right, and that farm stays preserved in agriculture, and agriculture enterprise for the future. Somewhere down the line, that 100,000 acres, if we get to it, preserves agriculture, and that is the ground that will preserve Carroll County and maybe even feed half the state of Maryland in the future for our grandchildren, not for us particularly here. So it is short term, and I understand 125 acres short term is not going to make or break us, but here again, it's a big picture. What we start to look at in the long run, how is it going to affect us? And we've done it time and time again and keep hitting back on that because it has been successful and the money has been put out there. It's a tough call, and I admit that, but it does have an impact on the local or in the area here. And I think they've been using all the money they have at the present time. I wish we had people from the actually from the AgPres area here speaking to us on the impact and the number of signups they have for this. But I'm sure those signups even will increase here as we start getting a far more limited agriculture economy coming about.
It's delaying the 120 or 125 acres a year. It's not taking it away. It's maintaining the goals that we still have in place. It's just going to take us a little longer to get there. I'm trying to figure out where, if needed, are we going to pull discretionary funds from to do the quality of life for the rest of the county, which includes education, the services that we are, determined to do. So, yeah, I don't want to, and I've shared this with you pretty much every day. I do not want to minimize our commitment to ag preservation, but I believe the prudent thing to do is to take some of those funds from it, maintaining still a very large amount, and continuing our endeavors in ag preservation for the county.
Well, that's the comment was said last year. The comment was said the year before. Land doesn't preserve itself, and once it's gone, it's gone. And if you want to look like PG County or some of the others, this is the way we start getting there.
Well, if the economy's tanked, I don't think there's a fear of gobbling up the farmland that presently exists. In actuality, if farmers are overproducing at the moment, expanding farming is only going to make it worse on existing farmers. So if there ever was an opportune time to pull back and actually help farmers, it would be now.
Doesn't quite work that way. You know, the average farm out here is a multi-million dollar operation. And, you know, they don't have the luxury of just cutting production here. And as compared to some, the cost of everything is going up. They're usually buying retail and selling wholesale, which is just the opposite of most businesses and what has to happen. Their margin is very small. Sometimes these situations like this, they have some ground that, or a farm that they haven't purchased yet or haven't put in easement, will be enough to get them through and over the hump or to change to the next generation. Yeah, I mean, it's a different type of funding source compared to businesses. And yes, can be overproduction at present time, but all we need is 3 months of a disaster here, and all of a sudden we're underproduction and in trouble. And it's nice to sit on a stockpile for a change. However, right now we could hit an area, a drought 3 months here, and that those reserves are gone. China can come in, start buying some, or somebody else. Our reserves get down, out. It's sort of just like oil many times, and you get the stockpile gone. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And it's a very fragile economy, a very different type of enterprise compared to most others.
But what we're talking about right now, I think, is whether we're going to bond the $5 million. We're not actually I mean, if you want to talk about how much we should leave in ag pres after because I just think the wrong way to do this is put the bond in. That's why I'm against the bonding. And it really has very, very little impact on it. The bond part is what I'm talking about. If you want to go back and talk about how much money should be in ag pres after we get rid of the bond part, then what I think you're saying is right on point, Commissioner Weaver. Right now, we're talking about the bonding of it. And I just don't see how the bond helps. I think it actually would hurt us in the future, because we'll be paying interest on this bond for X amount of years, and it won't even be useful at that point.
Actually, the bond, if we had a larger bond put in, we take it off the bottom line. Yes, it's used as it's used, then it is sold or that way, but it kind of takes it out of the budget as such. And the future, that was just an idea that came up with looking at this. And you know, if you bond it all at once, the last 25,000 acres is secure, and they can deal with it as appropriate. But you know, we have to look at the whole picture. I understand that, but bonding is a way to kind of stabilize some of this, I thought, in the future.
Yeah, but if you want to bond the entirety of what's left, it's going to be about a $120 million bond. No one is interested, I believe, in doing that. This was just to try to put back some of the money that was taken out of the 500,000 was taken out. We're trying to look at a bond to do it that way, but I don't think the bond is the right way to do that. I really don't.
So Deb, just to be clear, can you explain to make sure we have these lines correct, 100 and 101, please?
You there, Deb?
Yeah, I'm here. 100 is the adjusted bottom line without the debt service, without issuing bonds for ag pres. And row 101 is the bottom line with the $5 million bond.
So again, basically, the bond does not save us much in the out years. I mean, in 24, well, no, 23 through 26. It'd be a waste to be putting a bond in place.
That's approximately 45,000 a year.
What's that?
Approximately 25,000 a year.
Yeah, like I said, with the intent that I thought it was going to have, that's why we put it in place, but it doesn't look like it's going to have the effect we want. So, yeah, my recommendation is that we take away that bond. I can wait on the ag preservation, adjustment, and we can keep moving, and that's fine. But yeah, I think we should definitely take the bond piece away at this time. And then let's start having a conversation on where else we're going to try to either reduce our funds and curtail some of our expenditures.
Okay, we had a motion and second on that, so we can vote on that. And I'm going to agree. I think while I think it was a good idea, Commissioner Weaver, moving forward, that it didn't really do what I thought it was going to do on the bottom line. So that's why I don't know. That's why I'm not in favor of bonding, but I still am concerned, but agree that the emphasis has got to, we've got to try to balance every part of the budget here, every single line item. And while I'm concerned about taking away, everyone's going to have to sacrifice something. So that's why I'm leaning towards, well, I agree with the bond. Because the bond isn't doing anything, I think that's the way to go. So is there any other discussion on the motion that's on the table right now with with taking away the bond? Any more discussion or questions on that? So if not, if you could collapse that, Deb, and we'll take a vote on that motion. Okay. The motion is to not do the bond, the $5 million bond moving forward. All those in favor? Okay, and opposed? Okay, that was 4-1. Okay. In reference to a previous conversation, Ted, that you were having on whether we know or don't know any federal aid is coming or whatever it's going to be. I know that MACO put something out yesterday about the larger counties and the fact that they are able to put in, and I think it was 500,000 or over population, I believe. And then I think as I read down through it, it said that the smaller counties or the smaller jurisdictions would receive a funding through some sort of a process that they haven't identified yet. So it would appear as if we're going to get something, but we just don't know what the process is yet. Is that right?
Right. We don't know the process. We don't know any details unless something has happened today.
And that would be also one-time funds?
I would assume so. I don't believe the state or federal government's going to commit to ongoing funding for us.
One topic that we brought up last week was the entrepreneurship in the Miller Center over at the college. If we can move into having a bit of a conversation about that, I think it was $110,000 we fund each year to the Miller Center, to the community college for entrepreneurship. And that specifically is funding a position for entrepreneurship over at the community college. As you know, we've moved things around over this past year, consolidating some of our small business approach in the county underneath our economic development team, moving the SBDC counselor, the small business administration counselor into the Office of Economic Development. We took away the lease space that was in downtown Westminster and moved the individual back to the community college over at the Miller Center. I had a conversation with him, but more importantly with Dr. Ball and Libby Trossel who runs the Miller Center about the value that that position adds. They did a very good job laying it out on last week, and then also Dr. Ball shared a few more comments this morning to Roberta and I. So Roberta, please chime in when you feel appropriate. Bottom line is that the intent of the actions we took were to make it more efficient for small businesses in Carroll County to thrive and to grow and give them opportunities. The individual and the Miller Center provides a lot of mentorship and development for folks with ideas. This past year, it went up from last year to this year from 43 to 69 clients. So that's pretty significant increase in clients. And it also increased in actual business development from 27 in 19 to 30 in 20. Now, that's not nearly as much of a change, but it takes, time to develop an individual's ideas and concepts into a business. So I do believe the Miller Center is an integral part of small business development in Carroll County. The challenge is, do we want to continue to fund $110,000 annually for the next 5 years? My proposal is that we have a conversation now about maintaining the $110,000 for the next fiscal year and even entertain the following, but then pull it over the following 3 years or 4 years. That would bring us, $400,000 back, overall. I think there needs to be a transition period, and just like anything else, it shouldn't be a light switch on and off. And then also we can look at different funding in the out years as time moves on for the Miller Center to grow. In doing this, I really believe it's going to be continuously important to merge our economic development team with the college and the Miller Center and continue to drive them to working more together. Under Jack's and economic development's mentorship and small businesses commitment, small business administration's commitment, and the community college's opportunities to bring in new clients. So I know that was a bit long-winded, but it was a really good conversation with Dr. Ball last week. He reached out again. It was a very good conversation with the individual Tom, along with Libby Trossel last week. Roberta, was there any additions that you'd like to make?
I think you summarized it well. I think that that you explained the history of how we got to where we are and the kinds of work that they're doing today.
Ted, is any of that funding in question linked to grants?
No, it's funds that are coming out of our operational funds right to the community college. And it's, I don't know if the word earmarked or whatever, but it's designed for the one individual's salary and benefits.
Thank you.
Now, but a point is that the Miller Center is funded through a foundation, the Miller family. And we don't want as good partners to the college to see that dry up or that be in any sort of frustrating situation. So continuing our commitment to entrepreneurship and small business growth and development, us being the county to the college, is important. So want to keep them, and that may be another way of funding the position, but we'll see.
So
How
what's
many
your
other
suggestion?
How many other positions are funded into the SBDC?
The SBDC, we have one counselor that is provided through Small Business Administration. And that counselor, it sits over in economic development spaces.
So what's your bottom line suggestion again then, Ed, on this funding for this position again?
I believe holding on to this position for either, and I'm still grappling, either the next fiscal year 21 or fiscal year 21-22, and then pulling the funds 23 through 26. And I'm still having a tough time whether we need to maintain it for 1 year or 2, because trends are very difficult to figure out. And if we give it 2 years, there could be a whole lot more value, but this is hard to say. So,
But you're saying it's 1 or 2 years you're pulling the funding, therefore that position goes away. Therefore, the clients that this particular person has been working with, and you've indicated that there's been a tremendous increase in the number of clients that he's working with. So what happens to them? SBDC just absorbs them and tries to handle them with just the one person they have over there?
yes, either we work with Small Business Administration to get another counselor, another dedicated counselor into the county. And that's kind of what, from my experience from the Small Business Administration, is they look at throughput of clients. So I had a couple of counselors in Anne Arundel County, and I think there may be a couple over in Howard County. So it's not about population, but it really is about the activity. So what this will do is, if we put a timeline associated with this position, and we encourage the growth between the college and economic development and the SBDC, we will come up with a plan to transition in 2 years those clients to the SBDC and to economic development. So,
But you said then hopefully there'll be another counselor at SBDC. Well, what is the cost of that? Is that just moving money from one to the other? Is that going to cost less for the counselor? Is there a possibility for this person? Because I also look at individual people, this person moving to SBDC and working as a counselor there. I mean, I don't know if you've explored that or not, but the real question is, what's the cost of switching? So we're taking one position basically from the college, more or less, and moving it to SBDC for a counselor position. What's the cost of a counselor position?
we don't fund the SBDC. We don't fund that counselor. That counselor is coming from Small Business Administration, I believe. No?
We pay if not most, if not all, we pay most of their salary. Yes.
What's the funding then that we pay? Because I wasn't tracking that. So
Changed over the years. It's in the neighborhood of $50,000. Ted, you and Deb, I know.
Out of the 63 clients, how many have open businesses at the present time?
It's a great question, and it is a very well, it's a great question, and I've been asking very deliberately to move. What do the clients turn into businesses? And the best answer I got was that if you look at last year's clients of 43, and there were 27 businesses that were established. This year, clients of 69, and there's 30 small businesses that are established. So you could say a 50%, but I don't think it's as easy to do that. But because sometimes again, clients, you're looking at somebody that needs to be educated and developed and get small business loans and collateral and make their concept into a business. It may take 2-3 years. So yeah, I'd be reluctant to say, and I think it'd be very difficult for them to say as well.
This looks like one, I think, we look at it for a year and evaluate. This is not, I just don't think with the way the economy is, the way things are, we can predict more than a year in the future.
I'd still like to know the number of what we're paying for SBDC if we're adding a counselor over there. What would that be? Because if it's just taking money from one pot, put it in another pot, it's just a wasted exercise, in my opinion, because I think that the gentleman is doing a great job over there. I'm not saying he couldn't do just a great job just as great a job over at SBDC, but if it's the same amount of money, why make the switch at all? Or even if it's close?
It's not necessary to increase an SBDC counselor. Just maintain the one counselor that we have.
So one gentleman over there is going to take on 69 additional clients besides what he's already taken on SBDC? I don't know if that's possible. Yes, that to me is possible to do that.
The value that this guy adds is significant. He also adds, and I know I'm on both sides of the sword on this one. He does classes, he mentors, he develops. He is a part of the small business solution and development in Carroll County. That's why I don't want to get rid of the position right away. I think though, if we look at a couple years transition and then come up with a solution, we've got to find money somewhere. So that would be my proposal this time, is maintain funding for 2 years and then go from there.
So you mentioned the foundation, Ed, that is backing this position as well, or the emphasis on small business over there. If we pool our funding, what happens to the foundation and the future of that with the college? Because that's a little bit of a concern to me.
Yeah, it's an absolute concern of Dr. Ball as well. The answer, I don't want to say is unknown, but we didn't get into further discussion about it. What he doesn't want to do is whittle away the Miller Center, because the foundation is significant and that family has committed themselves to the Miller Center. So, but I don't really have a straight answer. Sorry. We could ask Dr. Ball to chime in. I think he's available. If he can dial in, he'd be more than happy to.
Didn't we pull the other positions already out of the Miller Center from last year, brought them back into economic development, at least one? We had everything out there and then pulled it.
Now, what we did was I believe, moved the SBDC, the Small Business Development Counselor, from Small Business Administration. We pulled that position to economic development, and we moved the position that we're funding with the college back into the college. They were in lease space over Westminster, and then we canceled the lease, I believe, in Westminster. That's something we inherited, or I inherited the first year. But I think, Dennis, is that correct?
I believe that is correct. Yeah. I could be wrong, but I believe that's exactly what happened. But what you're saying, I'm thinking, Ed, is that we're going to let this go for 2 years and then reevaluate it at that point. So if that's what you're saying, it sounds to me that's what you're saying, then there's no impact on the budget at all right now. What the impact would be is 2 years when it gets looked at again.
Why can't we pull the funding after 2 years of the position and bring $300,000 back into the general fund? Or is that not?
Well, then if what you're doing then is not reevaluating in 2 years, you're saying you're cutting it in 2 years. There's a big difference between
Yeah, that's
to,
what I'm saying. That is
which-
what I'm.
to cut it in 2 years.
Yes.
What you're saying was look at it in 2 years and decide what we're going to do with it.
No, that's what Commissioner Weaver said. I'm saying cut the position in 2 years, bring the funding back into the general fund.
Okay, so I'm agreeing with Dennis on this one. I'm not sure what the impact is going to be. We need to find stuff now. And based upon the fact that we're going to be reopening this, I think now it seems like everybody's in agreement. We're going to have to. That would be something that I think we would do in the long term. I hate to bring or hate to cut something I think that is very beneficial without doing more research on it in the out years in order to do that. I think our focus should be on trying to find the money now and concentrating specifically on 21 and maybe a little bit 22 as well, because, but sort of putting on hold that emphasis we always put on those out years. And I hesitate to do it if it doesn't help us now. And I don't really, just to completely cut it out there, I think is not a good idea. I mean, I think that some of the numbers you've shared, Ed, I think they've got some positive input there, and I'd like to see them stay and give us a chance maybe to come up with a different way. We could maybe reduce some of the funding if it's necessary in those out years, but to cut it just to get a couple extra 100,000 in 3, 4, 5, and 6, I'm not so sure is a good. I'm not looking at that as a good idea right now. That's my point.
Okay. No, and it's one of these things. I laid it out there with what I've been talking about. I laid it out there with the recommendation of maintaining the position, up front and not cutting the position. But if you believe that, cutting it in 2 years, whatever, is not the right approach, trust me, I am absolutely fine with that. What I don't want to do is take away this position now. And so I guess I'm getting the same results I want. I just, thought that if we did cut it would give us funds that we could be using for the out years. But if that's not where we want to look at it, that's fine. I'm absolutely, the more I can do for small business, the better I feel like I'm doing for our county. So if we can keep this position, that's great.
Commissioners,
Or looking at this in 2 years and reevaluating depending on what has or has not been done. That's why I'm looking at it right now.
Okay. So I'll take away any motion I may have made and just keep working with them and just continue to encourage the college's work with economic development in the county.
Commissioners, you've just had conversations now about AgPres and about this small business position. Just as you tackle various things in our budget, I think we're going to run into the same conversations over and over again. It will be very easy to say all the reasons to keep doing the things that we're doing because we're doing them for good reasons. At some point, if you are going to want to cut the budget somewhere, and maybe you'll choose not to, but if you want to cut the budget somewhere, we will end up cutting something that you're going to be saying, we don't want to do this. And with good reason.
So what about the idea, and everyone else seems to be doing it as well, or at least I get a sense that they're doing it. I mean, I believe I even heard the governor mention the fact that he was going to dip into the state's rainy day or contingency funds, or however they label them in the various jurisdictions, trying to plug that in an attempt to get 21 and 22 where it needs to be, and then sort of waiting to see what kind of aid we're going to get in order to help us with 3, 4, 5, and 6. What about that idea?
Well, right now, with what you have on the table, there's no need to tap into your reserves. Now, for year-end fiscal 20, we probably are going to have to. But as far as looking ahead to budget, I'm not sure why you would look at the reserves, unless it's to add expenditures. But then that's still going to leave you with your problem at the end of the plan.
I understand that, Ted. I guess my goal was to cautiously tap into reserves in order to get a couple of our categories at least closer to where we would like them to be, and that would only be again cautiously tapping into them to try. That's all. That's where I was trying to go with that conversation. Because I agree with you, Ted. Beyond that, this attempt to try to, listen, with the fact that we've got the 21 flat as a starting point, we've already cut. So I don't know where you go from here unless our focus should be on using some of our contingency funding to get a couple of the categories at least closer to where we want them to be. And then waiting to see what the aid would be and in what manner. One-time funding, I'll take any funding right now, one time or whatever. So that's to continue to sit here and look at all these categories. I agree, Ted. We're going to continue to get back to where we are with a hard decision on and then not be where we and then not get what we want out of it anyway. So that's why I was suggesting that perhaps maybe take a different approach.
What categories you looking at?
Well, the first one that comes to mind, Dick, would be education, but I would identify those categories that got hit the hardest as a result of our flat starting point, and then use some contingencies to plug those categories. And I know everyone got hit. I get that, but maybe identify those that were hit the hardest in an attempt to get them at least somewhere back, or a little bit of a bridge back in some point. That's kind of what I was going with, Dick.
I would like to see what the money says, the budget for the school system basically is right now, and where the projection for the next 5 years and where it was before we took the hit. I'd like to see how those numbers compare. If we can look at that.
Well, as things stand, 21 would be $5 million lower than was in the plan. Then if everything else went back to normal, then every year would be $5 million lower.
And Dennis, you had mentioned something about the fact where you saw that the county was going to get $2 million for education. I believe last week you saw that. And I saw that again in writing in the last day or two.
Yeah,
Can you, I don't know if you got any additional on that or whatever, but I saw it in writing.
Right. I don't have any additional information, but I did see it again in writing for $2 million for education for Carroll County. I did see that. I don't have any additional information beyond that. And I also heard, which I haven't seen this at all in writing, that the county, not the school system now, would get $2.6 million additional from the federal government. I haven't actually, I saw it one time, haven't seen it again. I don't know if that means it was a mistake when I saw it the first time or not, but the $2 million additional for the school system, I have seen that in writing twice now. One, I also think Ben Cardin brought that up as well. I think Commissioner Rothstein could talk about that more. But I think Ben Cardin brought that up, that we would be getting $2 million for the school system from the federal government.
Yeah, now it was last Thursday, but I did ask Dr. Lockhart about that, and he was unaware of $2 million.
If the state and federal government are coming up short as well, I don't know where they'll get that money for the local municipalities.
Well, the $2 million for the school system is coming from the whatever $1 trillion the federal government just released. That's my understanding where that's coming from, and that's why I have seen that. Now, the 2.6 for Carroll County, it specifically, I thought was coming from the same pot of money, but I have heard nothing additional about that. So I don't know if that's coming or not, but I would be hopeful, and I know it's not a course of action, but I'd be hopeful that the $2 million for the school system is there, since we've heard about it from Senator Cardin, as well as seeing it in writing. And so I don't know, but I'm hopeful that's coming through.
You know, on money to the county, one thing that might be confusing, the CARES Act was more than just extra money. A lot of existing funding for other purposes got folded into that. So there are places where they could be talking about money going to Carroll County that isn't new money, but would have been the same money we would have been getting anyway. Now, I don't know that that's what this is, but it's just one more complication in trying to understand what all is happening.
To kind of follow Ted's lead, if it's not there, it doesn't exist yet. And until we get it, we really can't count on it. I hate to say that, but we have to kind of build our budget. And then, as Steve alluded to, reopen in September. Hopefully we see how some of this falls out and maybe make the adjustments then. But we're really in difficult times here, and we really can't count on it until it's deposited to us.
Yeah, I agree, Dick, wholeheartedly with that. There's so many unanswered questions right now that we just don't know about. But I would think, and I might be really off on this, I would think everybody's doing their budgets right now. So I would think that between now and the end of May, that we would have a little bit better direction on where some of this funding is coming from. Everybody seems to be shooting from the hip right now until we get, until we get the right information. So I think we need to just, well, I don't know. I just think we need to take a step back and just maybe wait to see if indeed some of these things that we're hearing will come to fruition. And I go back to the schedule you put up there, Ted. And I get that we've got like 4 more sessions, but we don't have to adopt this until the end of May. And we're in extraordinary times here. Isn't there a way that we could have another session May the 23rd or something? Because we don't even know how we're doing a public hearing yet, or those things that we would normally do.
Okay, the problem is you have to, under current law, you have to release your proposed budget by the end of April. And we've been checking with MACo pretty regularly, and so far the only thing the state has been willing to change has been the idea that public hearing comments can be limited to written as long as you advertise it that way. As far as changing the schedule, we've gotten nothing.
And keep in mind, commissioners, after your public hearing, you usually have some proposed budget work sessions in May. So you would have some additional discussion.
I would almost suggest the proposed budget that we're going to put out is the one that we have right now. The flat budget with very little change. We've changed some revenue, but we haven't changed any expenditures yet. But because of the unknowns, I would almost suggest that the proposed budget is what we have in front of us right now that's up there. And yeah, there's some areas that took some hits, most notably the school system with the $5 million difference. And yeah, but I don't know how we could do anything different right now. If we get the additional funding, the 2 million, the school system gets 2 million from the federal government, then that's great for them. And if we get to 2.6 that I've heard, then we can come back and maybe make some adjustments. But I don't know how we can even make any adjustments without further information. I really don't. So maybe the proposed budget is what we have there. And I hate to say that because I would love to see more money for some other areas. And I mentioned 3, 4 already, but I don't see where the money's going to come from.
You know, I have a tendency to agree with you, Dennis. We're sitting here looking at the screen over and over again. It's not going to get any different. It's not going to change until we get something solidified out here. This whole budget's like carrying Jello in our hands right now, and we don't know where we're headed to with it, and it's getting very difficult. So I would look at, yes, we meet once before the end of April here. Maybe we get some answers to some things, make our changes. And if not, that probably will be the budget we have to put together. Hopefully next week or two, because we have 2 weeks in April yet, I believe. We have some time to get something coming down the road, or at least a little idea, change our sessions a little, and then come back when we have money to deal with it.
To tie together a few of the last thoughts here, you can you will need to release a proposed budget. That doesn't have to be the end of the story. As Roberta said, we do schedule time between the proposed budget, the public hearing, and your adoption in case there are things you want to change. Now, usually that's not a whole lot of change, but if more information emerges between the proposed and then, you do have that opportunity to act still.
Is there any way to reach out to the federal government to find out if and what funds may be coming to Carroll County? I don't know what avenue to take for that. I know Commissioner Rothstein has already talked to Senator Cardin, and he indicated that money's coming, but until we have something in writing or something concrete, I feel, as I think Dick's already said, I don't want to include that in anything. But it'd be nice to know, I mean, if that money's coming and they've already released the first, I don't know what they're called, stimulus package or whatever, then we should have some idea that money's coming to us. They've already released it. But we don't, which is really bothering me. I don't know. Go ahead.
Everybody's trying. And if it was simply a matter of picking up a phone and calling somebody, it would have been done already. Now, part of this is some of the bigger counties apparently have direct line to the money, and smaller counties have to go through a different process. That's the big question for us, is what's that process? Now, just this morning, there was something released that I haven't been able to look at yet. Whenever we get done here, I probably will be trying to see what that says. I don't know if it explains it better or not, but we might have more information.
And how much in reserves do you think it's going to take to balance out this existing budget for the last quarter?
Well, if the shutdown goes through the end of the fiscal year and that $4 million a month loss is correct, we would be about 15 million short of revenue. On the expenditure side, we'll probably be to the good $7 million, maybe more. So we'd be looking to make up $7 million, $6 million, something like that. You currently have 13.5 in unassigned fund balance. So we might be using approximately half of that, and you'd still have the remainder for continued reserves, or if we need to do something in 21.
The faster we open up our economy, the better off we are.
I don't feel competent to answer that question.
How big of a shortfall do you think we'll have in the next fiscal year?
That mostly depends on how long this shutdown goes and when we start reopening, how long does that take? It's another one of those questions I can't answer.
What would it take us to put to make a motion to have no more expenditures for the rest of our fiscal year? Cut whatever hasn't been spent doesn't get spent from this point on. What would that mean for the Carroll County?
I don't have an answer to that. A lot of the spending that will happen isn't really discretionary. It's going to happen.
I'm sorry. I meant discretionary. Any discretionary spending, we just cut out completely. I know there are things that we have to, spend money on. That's not what I was talking about. I guess I just said that kind of poorly. But any discretionary spending between now and the end of the fiscal year, let's just put a stop to it.
Okay. Well, we are looking at that. I don't have an answer for you. But keep in mind, we're well into April, so much of the year is already gone. This isn't like, making a change in September. So it will have some impact, but it's not going to be millions of dollars.
No, but I definitely believe it's worth looking into. Good, because I agree. If we did a freeze at this point, you
muted yourself.
Ed, you muted yourself
I
there.
apologize. Sorry. Yeah, I just don't know if it's $1 million, $2 million, whatever, but I think it's definitely worth looking into for the next 2 months if we did a freeze. So.
Ted, can you easily identify discretionary funds at this point to go with what Commissioner Fraser's idea would be and stop those, even though we're only talking about the rest of April, May, and June, and what would that include? Like, for instance, is that a hiring freeze? Is that, I think that's probably something we should be doing now too. I know that I think there's still a list of vacancies that are available. We should probably be looking at a hiring freeze until at least the end of the fiscal year, along with Commissioner Fraser's idea of any discretionary funding, stopping that. Can you identify those areas easily and quickly? And then we can make a decision on that?
Okay, easily and quickly, no. It will take some work, but we can get there. But I don't think we need to tell you how much we can get before you make a decision to say, do what you can to reduce spending. If everybody has a direction, reduce spending that doesn't have to happen, we will go make that work. And on the idea of a hiring freeze, when I talked about discretionary spending, I was not looking at that. And I think you should separate those two. But right now, we have a small number of people who are scheduled to come on April 30th. If anybody else is hired, it wouldn't be until May 30th. So there's not a whole lot of hiring going on right now. If you do pursue that idea, and I've brought this up before, I would just really encourage us not fill positions because they're open, because not every position is of an equal priority. I think there needs to be greater consideration beyond that to say, we can go without this position, but this one has to be filled. And some things are obvious. If we have a 911 position, we know we need to fill it. Not everything is as easy as that, but every position is not equivalent.
But that being said, I would like to make the motion that we halt or stop all discretionary spending to the end of our fiscal year. Was my mic on? I'm just kidding.
No, I'm just, that's sort of a wide open motion. I'm not sure. Could we try to hone in on that a little bit? Because, I've watched other jurisdictions put hiring freezes in place but then limit that by saying that with the exception of and I hate to keep using essential, but I think some of them said, with the exception of public safety employees or something like that. I just hate to do a wide open.
Well, when I said the discretionary spending, I wasn't talking about hiring. I'm just talking about discretionary spending, not including hiring. I would say, look at hiring separately. But right now I'm talking about discretionary spending, that we had things that we do not have to put money out for between now and the end of our fiscal year. Is what I'm talking about right now. And then we can look at the hiring at a separate motion.
Okay, commissioners, on that part, if you say that you're giving instruction to all of your departments to work with the budget office to reduce discretionary spending as much as possible, we can go figure out what that means.
That's what I'm looking for, yes. In my motion.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, Roberti, did you have something you were sort of leaning in here? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to separate the two, discretionary spending. It's something that at the end of the year, we work on with the budget office anyway. In the last few weeks, we limit discretionary spending. So it's not an uncommon thing to do. So we're just extending it a little further than those last couple of weeks of the fiscal year. So it shouldn't be a huge impact.
Yeah, actually, this would be extending it probably about 6 weeks.
Well, that's a few.
6 weeks is 6 weeks in these trying times. Any other discussion on the motion and second? All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Now, is there any debate or questions on a hiring freeze with the exception of public safety?
Well, I'm not sure public safety is the only people maybe we should be looking at. There might be other essential employees that we need, and I know it's the go-to term this time of year, but there might be other employees that we need to look at as well. And I don't know what that would entail, but there might be other employees besides public safety that we need to hire to keep the county moving. We have Roberta, any comment on that one?
Well, I would echo what Ted had said, that that just because something is open doesn't mean it is the least valuable position. And that if we're truly interested if we truly need to reduce staff, which doesn't seem that for at this point in fiscal year 20, I don't believe that we'd be recommending that we really need to reduce staff based on our fiscal situation. And we have very little hiring that is coming on, as Ted said. We pushed everybody off till April 30th. That is the next few folks that are being hired. I don't remember exactly how many, but it's not many. And I think it's less than 5, but I could find out if you really wanted to know. And then the next date would not be until the end of May. So we have time to make that kind of decision if we needed to in the month of May.
Is, public safety is a large area. You want to narrow that down to just maybe 911 center on that. And the other thing is, have we looked at early retirements as part of this, to push that one along?
I don't think we have yet, and I don't. Let me back up a minute. I did not in any way use the word reduce staff. I only said it in the concept of bringing people on at this time just doesn't seem to be a priority for us. I'm not talking reducing staff here. Let's be very clear. So I think you're right, Commissioner Weaver. I think we should at some point also look into whether or not we could offer some incentives for early retirement that would get us at a place where we could have entry-level employees that would save us money there. But again, I didn't say reduce staff.
On an early retirement, of course, there was always discussions. I'm not aware that we've taken on any formal effort to look at this. But my observation over years of many jurisdictions is this always sounds like a good idea, but it's very difficult to implement in a way that significantly helps. And there can be unintended consequences. You know, often you run into a situation like this and you offer a retirement benefit, you lose the very people you don't want to lose, even if there is some fiscal benefit to it. And you also run into, if we're going to be not hiring or slowing hiring, and also encouraging people to leave, then you're building the number of open positions, which I guess in terms of what you're spending makes sense, but in terms of providing services makes things more difficult. And when you offer the retirement benefit, you know, if nothing else, you know, the projected savings from a lower pay has to be lower than what you're going to pay somebody to leave for it to make sense. So, you know, we can look into it. It's just something you need to be very, very careful about the details.
You know, the school system has done this before and successfully. It worked, I think, several times. So just a thought.
You know, there's one big difference between us and the school system is just the size of the organization and the kind of, not that all teachers are the same, but most of the school system is teachers. You know, we have an engineer, a plan reviewer, a budget analyst. You know, it's a different kind of setup.
So I heard either Roberta or Ted, one of you said that there are 5 employees coming on in 2 weeks. That's a good chunk of change when you count in the benefits and all of that. Is there a way that we could identify what they are? Unless my colleagues are not interested in pursuing that, because it would be my idea that perhaps we could push it to the end of May, when we would have a better idea of the funding that we were being challenged with here.
I think that's fair.
Right, and what you said, you're not looking to reduce the number of employees, but perhaps pushing back the hiring date, in this case, a month, would be worth looking into. I really do think so. We're not looking to cut any employees at all, pushing back a hiring date to save some funding.
Is that doable, Roberta?
I'm finding out. Yep, just give me a minute. There are 5 full-time and 1 contractual, so I'm just finding out. Give me a second.
Okay, so, all right, thank you. That's good. And in reference to the, you know, we may indeed have to look at something incentive-wise. I don't know, Commissioner Weaver, at some point we may have to look at that. I mean, as we continue to try, we've always said about the fact that when it comes down to the large portion of our funding, it's typically people. That's where it is. So, I mean, that could be a good place to maybe be able to do a little bit there without reducing our workforce. I want to be clear. And we all know, all of us see it every day. We're seeing an increase in retirements anyway from those folks that have been with the county for a large period of time. We're seeing some folks with a lot of experience that have and will be leaving us soon anyway. So, which is concerning on not just financial or a fiscal way to look at it, but it's concerning with the fact that we're losing some of that expertise as well.
Okay,
So be-
so,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Roberta.
sorry, I have to list. So there are, as I said, 5 full-time. One's a comprehensive planner, one's an office technician, an admin person. One is a public safety technician. One is the building construction bureau chief. And then a building maintenance worker. And the contract, those are all full-time regular employees. And then the contractual is an aging program specialist in the labor program. So the position salaries range from $21,000 to a high of, so there are one at 21, 2 in the low 30s, 2 in the mid 40s, and 1 at 71.
But that's not including benefits.
That's just salaries, I believe.
Yeah, on benefit costs, remember, what we're primarily talking about there would be medical. We're self-insured, so it doesn't cost us anything until somebody actually has something happen. So it's not like you're triggering automatic expenditures, although, I mean, of course, you bring somebody on and you do take on the risk that something happens.
So the question remains, I suppose, what would the challenges be if we indeed just backed up those 6 to the end of May as opposed to the end of April?
So one thing I asked, because we have, a significant number of our staff at the moment because of the shutdown on admin leave, we believe that 2 of these positions would go probably pretty much immediately to admin leave, the office technician and the comprehensive planner. The others would, we believe, would continue to work.
But one is the contractual employee, so that really wouldn't cost us any money. Am I correct?
The aging person, I think it's in the waiver program. I don't know if they're covered by grants. Ted, do you know?
Yes, they are. That position is grant funded.
All right, so we wouldn't be talking about that particular position then, because it has nothing to do with our bottom line.
And one thing I was just reminded of is all these people are coming from other places, and it would be our belief, if not assumption, that they have already quit other or are in the process of quitting other jobs. Just as a thought.
So they have essentially already been hired. They've been told that they've been hired by the county. All right, then in that instance, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't want to do anything with that. We've already basically hired those people. Now the ones beyond that, we have another group that might be coming in that we haven't already committed to and haven't already made arrangements, because that's what I'd be interested in looking at. People we've already said, yes, we're hiring you. In my opinion, they've been hired.
Okay. That's a good way. If we've already made a commitment to hire them, we can't we really, that would be negative to do that now and put them in a place that they're in between. So I would agree with that, Dennis. I was just hopeful that that wouldn't be the case, but if we've already, those folks have already signed on the bottom line, then I agree.
Right, we just haven't gone through the onboarding process with them. They've already accepted these positions.
Could we,
I believe the folks that anybody were contemplating for next in May probably are not in that situation, but I'll find out to make sure.
could we just simply look at a hiring freeze until we reopen the budget? And unless it's an essential employee, and look at, that type thing, and things we don't even know we need yet, but we just don't add anybody until we reopen the budget in September and say, what we can save there.
Well, by hiring freeze, you're not talking about these 5 individuals that we just brought up, because we basically already hired them. Anybody beyond them is what you're talking about. Is that correct, Commissioner Weaver?
Yes, correct.
Okay, I just learned we have not made any offers to anyone for May. So we could just stop that till the end of the year, if end of the fiscal year, if you so wanted.
I would be more apt to do that than all the way to September, I think, Dick, because we might see, here's my glass half full, half empty. We might see something that would occur prior to September that would help us. But I don't think we should be hiring anybody until the end of the fiscal year, except for the 5 or 6 people, that 5 plus the 1, and you're right, Dennis, that one doesn't really, but 5 plus the 1, except for those 6 individuals.
And it might make you feel a little bit better, in any year, HR shuts down the hiring process partway through June anyway, as we transition through a fiscal year.
So again, a little like the discretionary spending, things sort of wind down to a halt in the middle of June. So not hiring in May shouldn't impact the organization too broadly. I would again ask if the commissioners wanted to do something for fiscal year 21, that we look at a broader review of county staff rather than just empty positions and not hiring them. I think that would be a better way, since we're so thin on the organizations. We say we're we have one person doing every job, that I wouldn't want, if we're just missing that one person, it wouldn't necessarily be the position that department would give up. They would want to look at their broader implication of what position they would not want to fill, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that would kind of go in the line of where I was going. I don't want to not fill something that's critical. So that's kind of where I was. But I truly do think that the process, and if we shut it down middle of June anyway, I don't think there's a problem with, let's include May, and then that'll give us a chance to look and do that process, and it will get us to the end of the fiscal year. So I'm not sure how I want to make this motion, but I think May the 1st, we should stop the hiring process until the end of the fiscal year, with the exception of those that would be deemed critical.
Second.
And again, we wrestle with these terms: essential, critical, necessary. But I don't, at the end of the day, I think we pretty much all know what they are, right? Without having to spell it out.
Yeah, personally, I think so. But we should not make this too complicated, so.
Okay, so that's a motion and second. Now I'm gonna throw gonna throw something in here that after I've made that motion, we had in the fiscal 20 budget, the current budget that we're operating in, the position for Director of Fire and EMS. I would entertain that. Well, I think we should probably try to make some sort of an effort to get that person on board. But my thoughts from my colleagues on that. I hesitate to make an exception here, but I know that that's been built in. But comments from my colleagues on that one.
Well, that has been built in, but I also thought we were going to look at the I don't know what you call it anymore, the agreement with all the group that put up the agreement that we were going to look at, that had the committee to put together and all that kind of stuff first before we hired anybody. I don't know when we're going to get around to doing that. So that might be a moot point, because we've got to look at that first to make any changes we want to before we hire that person. And that, in my opinion, is going to, it's not, we've got the budget workshop, the budget sessions going now. I don't know when we would get to that. So that the hiring of that person might be pushed back a month or two just because of that formality that we want to get out of the way first.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dennis. And honestly, we were to the point, and Ed, you can chime in here to correct me at any time, because we've been sitting on that group of 7 to try to get it to 2 or 3 that would be in front of the 5 of us. And it's 2-3 right now. It's to 3 individuals, but we were going to attempt to maybe try to get that to 2. But that's going to be tough to do virtually anyway. So by the time we get through all the process of setting all that up, it might be a moot point as to not to include that position as well in this May 1st motion.
Because I would really like to look at that agreement, or whatever you want to call it, the MOU or whatever that we have. I would like to fine tune that first before we hire anybody.
It's bylaws for the Emergency Services Advisory Council that you're referring to.
That's what it's called. Okay.
You know, I think that's fair if we take the time to look at the bylaws and finalize that. I mean, it would be great to get this director on board, you know, I really would, but we're only talking a couple months now. So I think we should hold off on bringing somebody on board at this point, finalize the bylaws, continue having the conversations, set the stage for them, and then beginning of next fiscal year, bring them on board.
You know, I know we need help, and our fire and EMS service is asking for it, but in the words of Commissioner Wance, everybody has to sacrifice something. And that was a joke. But as we're looking at this, I know they have a need, and they have some critical staffing issues, but I guess we've gone this long. July 1st is not going to be any much different.
I'm more concerned about their tactical situation, you know, between now and when this is over with, keeping them healthy, keeping them at the ready. So I don't want anything to deter us from looking at that and being prepared to support them that way. Which, you know, right now, knock on wood, everything's fine, but it can change very quickly. So, yeah, keeping our attention on the 14 stations, their tactical situation, their readiness, then focusing on the bylaws. I think our plate's full and necessarily full. And then next fiscal year, we just start with the hiring process.
So ordinarily, you all know me by now, I'd be fighting for this position, but I think because we're in an extraordinary time here, I'm agreeing with all of you. And I will say, Ed, to your point, with the weekly or the daily EOC calls that we're involved with, CCV's is doing a great job of coordinating all those folks. They've got a pandemic response tactical team now that they're working with. That includes a lot of folks from many of our volunteer fire stations. And to be honest, even if we brought an individual on at this point, there's such a learning curve that I'm not so sure that they'd be able to hit the ground running anyway at this point, because there would be a necessity to meet with everyone. And you know how that's going right now. That's not happening. So I'm good. And I think the motion was to May the 1st, hire no one until the beginning of the fiscal year, unless they are deemed to be a critical position. And I had a second. Any other questions on that? If not, all those in favor? And I see 5, so that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Dennis, you had brought up that you were thinking that what we got in front of us is the proposed budget. I'm not sure that I would agree that there shouldn't be a little bit more dialogue between now and the end of April. But I do think that you're probably very, very close to being correct, unless we identify some fiscal support that we are anticipating. So I would go along with what you're saying, but I think we should just sort of stand by, if you will, until we say this is the proposed budget.
You know, there's a Mako just sent out, and Ted, this is probably what you're referring to, fast track process for federal COVID funding. Applications that are due by April 17th. Not sure all the details in it, but they're looking for our input. So that's something that we have, you know, possibly there may be, that's where the funding is going to come from or identified. I did reach out to Senator Carnes' office to see what he has to say. I'm going to be on the phone calls this week as well. So maybe they'll, you know, it's a fast moving train on some of these activities. It's a very slow moving train on, you know, day to day lifestyle. But, you know, as we learn more, it may shed some light on what, you know, will be available for us walking into the budget. But you're right. We just don't know at this point.
And that application has to be in by April 17th. So it's
Yeah, but the problem with that is, if you read the fine print, that's for the big counties with over 500,000 people in them. So it clearly says on that email that the smaller jurisdictions will be told at some point, but there is no process yet.
process, there's just smaller. It says there by application though, there's smaller counties.
No, but it says, hey, Dick, it says, note the smaller jurisdictions under 500,000 population will receive the shares through a state process. Guidance on that process is forthcoming. So disregard.
So with that being said, what from my colleagues do you identify as a need to come back to talk about this budget? In other words, we've got this afternoon scheduled, we've got tomorrow scheduled, and we've got all day Thursday scheduled.
I don't know what else we can talk about this afternoon, unless you have some more information. And I mean, I don't know how the rest of you feel. I'd say hold off till Thursday and see if we get more information on something else before we come back. I don't know what else we can do. I really don't. I mean, I would like to say, yeah, I would love to put more money here, here, and here. I have no idea where that money's coming from, so I'm not going to say that. And until we have some more information on possible additional funding sources, I don't know what to do. I really don't. I don't know how anybody else feels.
I agree with you. I think all we'd be doing is pontificating and not necessary to do that in open session. So my recommendation, like you, is let's just start up on Thursday.
I agree. Ted was right here. We're sitting here, batting things back and forth, so we don't have any solution to it and no money to deal with right at the present time. We need to get some solid facts to deal with before we can move ahead.
I don't know what we can do to reach out to the federal and state to find out what additional funding might be coming our way, but whatever is possible, we need to look at that and do that, between today and Thursday, because I really would like to have more solid information, as I'm sure everybody would. I don't think they're coming to us. I think we've got to try to reach out to them as much as possible. And I mean, how do we do that? What's the venue?
Well, there are a couple of telecom meetings. One is tomorrow afternoon, but I did, like I shared, just reach out to Senator Cardin to find out what he knows or what he's able to share. I think just continue to poke him and get some information, and we can all do it from different angles. But I mean, right now it's just like you said, everybody wants to know the information and nobody knows it, and nobody's willing to say this is where it's at. But it's not going to stop me from poking.
I think we really need to start focusing on reopening the county government and our economy.
Okay, so we've got Thursday morning, we've got several items on our agenda that we'll be dealing with first. And we've added one today because the landfill needs to be number one on Thursday morning. So with that, we've got about 4 or 5 items that I don't think are going to take a whole lot of time. And then we can hold the rest of the morning for budget talks and the afternoon as well, if we need to, based if some of these discussions on our agenda are a little bit long. So then that would mean that we will not meet this afternoon nor tomorrow. Is that the consensus from my colleagues? Okay, Ted. I know there's not much more that we can do. Perhaps by then, let's keep our fingers crossed that we might have a little bit more direction. I'm not sure, but your thoughts on that?
I don't know what to think. I understand what you're saying. My fear is that if you end up wanting to talk more, we run out of time. But I understand. And I guess in the meantime, something for you to think about, even if we find that there is money coming from the state or the federal government, I think you need to ask, well, what does that actually mean in terms of making other decisions? Because, it's almost certainly one-time money. I know you want to add money to the school system. Say $5 million showed up and you say, well, that's exactly what we needed. Let's give it to the school system. But I don't see how that works because I don't know what we do in 22.
I think any aid we get should plug the shortfall that we'll have and execute in our existing fiscal year and next fiscal year. That's why I really think staff needs to start thinking about how we can reopen and some hearings or sessions we have right in the immediate future should be about transitioning that process because it is coming and we need to be on top of it.
And again, on that note, Ted, I don't think any of us would plug in an amount like that just to say that that's what we want to make up the shortfall, which is why I suggested before that maybe a list of those that were most hardest hit with the fact that we've got a proposed flat budget right now. Maybe prioritize those, you know, the education got hit by 5 million. The next thing, 2 million, the next thing, 3 million, and make that list so that if indeed we would see some additional income, we'd have a sense for what we could plug in based on the severity of those that have been hit.
We can provide that for you, but whatever the numbers, I guess my concern remains the same. How do we give ongoing funding with one-time money?
Does the community college also, the community college also have some additional funding coming to them? I think that was mentioned somewhere in here, if I'm not from us, but from some other source.
Yeah, the numbers that were just released from the Department of Legislative Services yesterday shows almost $1 million increase in state funding. I think we had been thinking about 600,000 or so. I have no idea why that changed and what this means. And then the other thing is, assuming that that is correct, how is the governor going to react to this? Because, you know, he has said, now it's not as simple as this, but he's basically said, don't look for me to be signing legislation that has funding increases in it. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's lumped together. Not sure that he could just not sign the budget, but he does have some means after the fact to go back and make changes. So it's, again, all very complicated. But the simple answer to the question you asked was, it looks like there's $1 million increase of state funding to the community college.
Well, Ted, I think one of the things you're worried about, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is that we're going to be talking about how we're going to adjust the budget in the next couple of years and ongoing expenses. Well, the fact is, I'm suggesting we don't talk about it right now because there's no way to adjust it. There's no ongoing money coming in. And if this one-time money comes in, my suggestion would be to look at the CIP. We can plug some stuff in there and maybe plug some money or backstop it the way we had before with some one-time money. But as far as ongoing revenue and ongoing stuff, I don't see that we've got anything to talk about right now because we don't, just because of the information that's out there, we don't know what's going on. So, and if we get additional funding, I'm looking for CIP. That's what I'm looking at. And maybe backstop it and taking, if we got $5 million, using it over 5 years or something of that sort. And then, yeah, I know the 6 years is a problem, but hopefully we've made some adjustments. The economy has made some adjustments by that point. That's how I'm looking at things. I don't know what else we have to talk about. You're worried that we're going to run out of time. What are we going to talk about? I don't want to look at the screen for 2 hours with nothing said because there's no way to move any money around. Oops.
Okay. Roberta, we'll readjust the agenda as you always do. All of us would like to put the landfill first on Thursday's agenda. That needs to be number one. So then adjust accordingly. And for the open meetings, folks that are watching us like hawks, make sure that all gets put out there. And I know you'll do that very well. You guys always do. But I mean, I have to agree with Dennis. We can sit and stare at the screen and try to pick, 1,000 here and 1,000 there. But at this point, I don't know how that's going to help us at all. So I think this gives us a chance to catch our breath, if you will. We'll keep Thursday the whole day open so that when we get done with our agenda items on Thursday morning, we can discuss more and then we can hit it back in again on Thursday afternoon. We've got, I think, 3 hours set aside for Thursday afternoon. So and then we'll go from there. Is that good with everybody? Roberta, you have anything? Yep.
There's another conference call that you and I usually sit on at 1 o'clock on Thursday. Do you want to start session then at 2? As we've done in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, that's the one with the governor and his cabinet. That's very important to be on. So sorry with our colleagues. We'll go from 2. And if we need to, we can go to 5. Anybody have a problem going from 2 to 5 to pick up that extra hour?
I could say I have to get home, but I'm already here, so no.
I'll have to cancel my dinner reservations.
Hey, and I was supposed to have a hair appointment, so that's not happening.
I got
Wow.
no excuse.
I knew I shouldn't ask that question. I knew it. So, okay. All right. That's what we're going to do then. And listen, once again, there's no template for where we are right now. And I want to commend my colleagues and all of us, our staff, for these decisions. We are doing the best that we can. And that's pretty gosh darn good, I got to say. And we're doing very well here. So we'll pick it again up on Thursday morning at 9 a.m. We'll start off with our landfill and go from there with our agenda items, and then go with the rest of the budget talk the rest of the day. And if we need to, we'll tack that extra hour on the backside of Thursday afternoon to get us till 5 o'clock. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, thank you all very much. Everyone stay safe. We'll talk to you soon. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you all very much.
You're welcome. I hope nobody gets